A few months ago, I picked up this book, Discovery Witches, part of the All Souls trilogy. I was initially turned off by the fact that it includes vampire and witch romance, but believe me, the book far exceeds my expectations, thank God. So, it begins with a witch named Diana Bishop, an American who is currently at Oxford as a professor. She's studying in the library in order to create her manuscript. Her specialty is alchemy, so she's going through old texts, and one in particular she's never called for before from the stacks. She decides to find it to research. So she calls for Ashmole 782. What she doesn't know about it is that it's a lost volume. It hasn't been seen for over 100 years. Now, like everything Diana does, she inexplicably succeeds. That's just the rule of this series. If something is impossible, don't worry, Diana's got it. So she goes into the library, she calls for it, the book comes. All the witches are currently gone, celebrating a holiday, so they won't be in the library, they won't be bothering her. Another witch, Jillian, actually comes and asks her to join them, but Diana doesn't want to be a part of other witches. And to be fair, her parents were also witches, and they were horrifically murdered because they were witches, so I think she can have a little bit of a break for wanting to distance herself from magic. Well, while she's in the library, there happens to be another creature, a vampire named Matthew Claremont. Now, there are three kinds of creatures in the world, and they make up 1/10 of the population. There are vampires, which are self-explanatory, witches, again, self-explanatory, and daemons, which are prone to madness, and they're born just sporadically into family trees. You don't know when one's going to be born, you don't know how. It just happens. And the creatures are currently facing a major population decrease. A few hundred years ago, they almost completely outnumbered humans, but due to witches just dying out and vampires not being able to reproduce, which, by the way, if they can't do that, looks like a series of horrific murders, it's just impossible for them to reach the same population level they had before. And the vampire who is watching Diana, Matthew Claremont, happens to be a geneticist, so he is currently trying to figure out why daemons are born, why witches are born, why vampires are born, how to combat all these issues. He's also studying genetic markers, meaning what powers do witches have, where do their powers come from genetically, like mitochondrial Eves and such, the first witch. So he's immediately taken with Diana, and instead of, asking her if he can hang out with her, he just pesters her. He sits with her. And Diana soon starts to realize, 1, Matthew is not leaving. He's not going to leave. Matthew is staying, instead of actually asking her permission. 2, he will not leave her alone. 3, it does not matter what she says. He will stay. And in fact, he watches her even when she doesn't know he's there. He goes and watches her while she's rowing, exercising, just chides her for daring to go out early in the morning without anyone to protect her. He's worried that if she drowns, there'll be no one to save her. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, and the vampire decides to combat this by stalking her against her permission. Well, needless to say, they're going to fall in love. Even after Matthew actually goes into her room and watches her, maybe it's outside her window, but he sees her sitting down, he sees her read a book, and he watches her fall asleep. That is the perfect foundation for healthy romance, guys. Everyone remember that. Just watch them while they're sleeping without their permission, and they'll just fall for you. Their courtship begins, and by courtship, I mean Diana starts to get used to him and is progressively less annoyed, while Matthew still refuses to leave her alone. He follows her into the library again, while all the other witches and daemons and vampires are just trying to pester her. They want this information. One witch named Peter Knox actually tries to go in her mind and take it, but thankfully he stopped. The other witches threaten her. The daemons are a little nicer. There's one named Agatha who actually implores Diana to please, if she finds the book again, share it with the daemons, because they're always forgotten. And I think that's fair, because honestly, the daemons get the worst deal out of anything. They just have mental health issues, and they don't know how to combat it. They don't know why they're there, how they're there, how to help themselves, why anything happens like that. And they don't really have the exact powers that witches and vampires do to at least make things a little nicer for them. The vampires actually want this, by the way, just for some answers on how they're created, who the first vampire was. And Matthew's actually trying to figure out if the creatures are actually different species from humans, or, if they're all kind of different parts of the same one. How did they originate? So it's actually pretty fascinating genetic stuff. I'm not very good at explaining it, unfortunately. It's much better written in the book, but even if you don't like vampire-human romance, it's really kind of worth it for the genetics. So Matthew and Diana get along very well after he takes her to a magical yoga class, which incidentally sounds like a Cartoon Network show. They also have dinner together. She makes food for him, he makes food for her. Matthew continues to be obsessed with wine. Every other chapter it feels like they're having something that's like 700 years old, worth $40 million, stuff vampires keep around casually because they're going to be around for several hundred years, so might as well stock up on wine. Well, after a while, the threats escalate. It's not going to get any better for Diana, she realizes, especially after she sent a picture of her parents. The picture being them right after they were gruesomely murdered. Needless to say, she freaks out, and there's no blaming her for that. After that, she and Matthew decide to leave the country. Matthew makes the amazing choice of taking her to France, where his vampire mother lives. Now, his vampire mother does not want witch girlfriend to come over. Her husband happened to be horribly murdered by Nazi witches. So, not wanting a witch in her house is completely understandable. Unfortunately, Matthew doesn't really care. You'll find that he goes against every single wish of all the women, because that's what happens. You have to obey the man in this book. So anyway, they go to Vampire House in France, where Diana meets Matthew's vampire mother, who incidentally looks younger than he does, which is a bit creepy, and their vampire servant. Which, by the way, vampire servant? You're immortal. You live for hundreds of years. You can save money. Just put it in interest forever. You can shape all of human history. You have decades, if not centuries, longer than normal human life. And so you decide to be a vampire servant doing vampire dishes. And apparently this is like a sort of prestigious thing, because in the second book, there are also vampire servants from a line of vampire servants. That doesn't make any sense. If you're going to be some sort of eternal supernatural creature, why not just get some humans? I mean, if you're going to eat them anyway, why not have them do the work for? I don't understand how is it worth it to year after year after year just clean up vampire food and make vampire beds and, I don't know, just vampire fans? It just is a complete waste of vampire powers. If you're going to go big. Anyway, Diana and his mother Isabeau do not get along well. And again, I don't blame them. It's a mixture of Diana's ingrained hatred towards other creatures, by the way, given to her by her Aunt Sarah, who raised her, as well as her Aunt Sarah's partner, Emily, who's not as bad, by the way, about that. It's sort of a thing among the creatures to hate each other, and you'll find out why. It's because they're not really allowed to interact by the convention. Is it the convention? Well, there are 3 witches, 3 vampires, and 3 demons who preside over all the others, and it's the covenant. And the rule is no vampires can marry witches, no vampires can marry demons, etc., etc. They're not supposed to mix. So because these tensions arose to combat that, there's a reason why they don't like each other. And again, Isabeau's husband was tortured by Nazi witches and driven to insanity, so you can't really blame her for being a little apprehensive that her son has brought home someone he's known for 2 weeks, and she's going to stay there now. Well, considering how swimmingly they all get along, Matthew eventually has to leave. He goes to visit his lab with his vampire son, Marcus, and his vampire friend Miriam, who does not like Diana, by the way, and Diana does not like her, because there's been some sort of break-in. Now, he goes for a second reason that he doesn't bother to tell Diana, which is he's going to murder her friend Jillian. Well, they're not really friends, because Jillian sent her the horrific picture of her parents being dismembered, and cut up, but it's okay, because he kills her, and he sets her in front of Peter Knox's door. Really subtle there. Matthew Claremont, making friends since like 1200, 1400, who cares? So, while he's gone, thankfully, Isabeau and Diana start to become friends after Isabeau takes Diana on a hunt. The hunt meaning Isabeau will jump off her horse, like grab a rabbit, just stuff it in there, just drink the rabbit's blood, throw it down on the ground. Okay, let's go find a quail, let's go find a doe, let's go eat another rabbit. Hey, there's a hedgehog over there. I don't know if there are hedgehogs in France, but she just swallows all the animal's blood. She's just like, oh, nom, vampire. And Diana's like, okay, this is pretty cool. I think I want to get in a relationship with this. So Diana and Isabeau start to get along because they've accepted each other. Now, when Matthew gets back, he's pissed. Because, 1, they went against him. They went against his vampire wishes. 2, he's supposed to take this slowly with Diana. What if she'd gotten eaten? I mean, I guess that's kind of fair that she hasn't, a little worried that she's going to get eaten. So, I mean, yeah, but again, Matthew takes Diana riding, which Diana has done all her life, and he decides to put on this, giant turtle shell thing of protection for Diana, who insists she doesn't need it, and he makes her wear it anyway, because God forbid she had any free will. That's unhealthy, Diana. Unhealthy.